Well, good evening. We'll give you like 60 seconds if you want to finish a conversation. Find your seat. We'll give you a few more seconds for that. All right, well, again, good evening. Welcome to all of you here. And we decided at the last minute to stream to our online group, so it's the private group. So if you decide to want to watch back later, you're welcome to do that. If those of you who are surprised to see us online, surprise, we're happy that you're joining us. This is our very first, what we're calling, Forum for Unity. And this idea was born out of our last series, I Am My Brother's Keeper, which was born out of the instances and the circumstances that surrounded George Floyd and the riots and all that occurred. And that series was born out of that. And prior to that, you remember our story with Malcolm. Malcolm, around that point, introduced me to Dr. Rodmon King as somebody who I should talk to and could maybe help me better understand some of what was happening. And then as a result of that, he offered to maybe at some point, if we took any steps or action steps out of that series, that he'd be willing to come and to help us through some of these things and to speak to some of those things. And so that's sort of the short of it, of how he has come to be here with us. Now again, the purpose of a Forum for Unity is to, on the one hand, get us off of social media, which I am not a fan of in terms of debating or arguing or having a conversation. I think it lends itself towards belittling and tearing people down and not much in the way of having a productive conversation. And so this is a place, hopefully, that by God's grace will establish as a model where we can come, and how many of you have strong opinions about one thing or another? All right. Now, that's okay. We should, and especially as Christians, we have strong opinions. But we also, in so doing, want to be willing to listen to other people's strong opinions when they differ to ours. We want to listen respectfully. We want to listen civilly. And let's just be honest that sometimes we may be wrong. And we have to come and be willing to be persuaded as well as willing to persuade other people. And so hopefully this will provide that place where we come in humility and at the same time encourage to tackle some issues, to tackle some topics, to listen, to talk, and to learn. So that's why this exists, and we'll see again by God's grace how it branches out into future topics and future even speakers. So before I invite Dr. Rodman up, I'd like to pray. Father, this evening we look to you. We always look to you for direction and for guidance. We look to you for wisdom. We look to you for the steps we are to take as your church, but also as Christians, as your disciples. And so as we begin this Forum for Unity, first and foremost we pray for a spirit of unity. That, Lord, even if we were to hear things that we disagree with or disagree even strongly with, that by the grace of Christ we would maintain the bond and the spirit of unity. And that nobody would leave this place, Lord, with a bitter heart or an angry heart, but Lord, that you would even so help us in difficult conversations, Lord, to sharpen one another, but even so to find a grace that even then changes us. So we ask to be present in the midst of us. Come and bless this time as we seek to grow together. In your name we pray. Amen. So as I've said previously, Dr. Rodman King is chair for the Campus City Relations Committee, and so I would like to invite him forward and like to ask you to welcome him this evening.
To make sure folks can hear me. Boy, that's loud. I have to hold it down a little bit. I don't want to just too far. Right about here. Okay, I'm gonna take my jacket off too. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about identity, right? And social identity. There's so many things going on in the world, and we may have some time during Q&A to talk about that. But to understand the roots of where we are in the world today and things like that, it really starts back with social identity, how people think of and identify themselves and things like that, and how that shapes their experiences, how that shapes how they navigate the world, how other people interact with them and engage with them. So we're going to talk some about that, and I promise I'm not going to use this voice forever, because half an hour in, people will start to fade. go to sleep. So you may find me standing, sitting, standing. If it becomes off-putting, just say, stop doing that. So a few things about how I approach talking about these issues. There's a lot of people that come in and want to set people straight. Let me tell you something. It's not how I operate, okay? Anytime that I engage in a dialogue with anybody, people in the community, students, people at Oswego, I go into those circumstances or those contexts not only thinking about what I can share, both in terms of knowledge and experience, but also looking for what I can learn, right? And I've been fortunate that I've got a job that puts me in those contexts a lot, and I leave every one of those sort of circumstances, engagements, having learned something about other people, about myself, about the world, about just learning something. So we're going to have this moment, this open moment to talk and exchange and learn and maybe leave this place together having learned something, okay? So unlike other places where I talk, this is a church, right? In case you didn't know. You didn't know it was a church. So, it's an interesting thing. I grew up, my father, I grew up in Rochester. My father was a city court judge and a lawyer, and also an ordained minister in the Church of God in Christ. So I grew up in a Christian household as a PK, preacher's kid, And my father was not with us anymore, but my mom still is. If you were to ask her about her identity, how she identifies, the first thing I could actually call her, but then we get a whole different story. I'd have to talk about my niece and what's going on, and have I talk to my nephew, and there you go, and all kinds of other wonderful things that I'll be doing tomorrow night, but not maybe for here. She would identify herself as a child of Christ and a citizen of heaven, waiting for that grand and glorious day when the Savior would come back, or that she would have spent her time in this mortal coil and would be there waiting, going to the waiting arms of Jesus, right? And that is amazing and true. My mother and my father both lived great lives and touched the lives of individuals, right? But there's also something that, having grown up in the church and having grown up in, I'm 52 now, like I know a bunch of stuff. I'm 52 now, and having seen the world and the way that Christians sometimes operated, members of the body of Christ, there are things that can interfere or get in the way or obscure people understanding themselves as citizens of heaven, right? Now, sometimes it's mundane things. Now, I can say this because my mom's not here. There's this, and I don't know if it's true of this church. I won't even ask, pretend like the pastor's not here for a second. There's a thing about seats and pews and places that people get really angry about. So one time in church, this sister comes in with, another church member and has some family, and they sat in our pew. Now, I didn't know there was like naming rights, like the Bills Stadium. You get to pay, you tithe enough, and you get a pew named after your family. That's not it, right? So no one designated that, but we had sat there every Sunday in that pew, just, third in the row back on the right. There you go, that's us. How dare she? Who do these people think they are? That's our seat. This is our church. You'd think they'd be respectful. Now, and this happened when I was a teenager, and I said something that, if we weren't in church, I think my mom might have tried to kill me, right? Because I looked at her and I was like, I don't think God cares where we sit. I don't care, we're in church. I don't think God cares if we're sitting in the front, the back, the side, the middle. The fact is that we're here to worship. This is one of those times when, and those of you who are parents, communication with the eyes, right? And the clear message was, you should stop talking now. So I held my peace, and later we talked about it. My mom's like, yes, it's silly. It's a pew. That doesn't, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter, right? But more troubling things. I remember going out, as we did, and churches still do today, to evangelize and share the good news. We're canvassing a neighborhood, and one of the older people that I was with said that they were not going to go to certain households. And I was like, well, is it dangerous? No. Those people are white, and I am not going to evangelize white people. And this is not a distortion or a change, this is a direct quote that this person said to me. And so, I went and talked to people and shared and things like that. And then later I just sat at home thinking about how could it be that you can call yourself a Christian, think of yourself as a citizen of heaven, and then say, I'm not going to talk to this one or that one because of their race. So the truth of the matter is that our vertical relationship with heaven sometimes gets complicated, obscured, and damaged by our horizontal relationship with other people. And sometimes that's intentional, right? We hold hate in our hearts. And other times, the harder part is when it's hidden and it's not our conscious thoughts and it's other things going on, right? That's the harder piece, right? So someone who's got hate in their heart, and you say, hey, you should just stop hating, and let's talk about this, and why are you, but something else, when it's not that clear, it's harder to root out, right? So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. Identity, how identity works, everything. Don't get fooled by the notebook. This is not pages of notes. I got a couple pieces of paper just to keep me on track. That's all that I'm going to talk about, right? So social identity. So I'll give you this technical definition. What is it, right? It's a person's sense of who they are based on group membership, okay? And social identity groups, as they're talked about in the literature and all over the place, some are based on physical characteristics, right? Some are based on social characteristics or mental characteristics, things like that, okay? So race is one of them, okay? Religion is another one, okay? My sister still goes to the same church that we grew up. Takes my mom every Sunday, so she's the loved sibling. Why can't you be more like your sister? Takes me to church every Sunday. My sons don't love me. Yes, we do. My brother is a Muslim, and he converted to Islam when he was in the Air Force, and he was stationed in Turkey. And he has raised his children Muslim, but we still celebrate holidays together, all these things. Different social identity groups, right? And different ways of being present in the world. So race is one, gender, okay, is another, okay? Age is another. I'm at that glorious point in my life where AARP keeps sending me stuff, and I can't play like I am not eligible. Why are these people sending me this stuff? It's because you're 52. Okay, all right. Yes, it's true. I like my discounts. But there are others, and I don't have to go encyclopedically through those, right? I'm going to share with pastors some materials that if, as a congregation or members there, want to actually think about their identity some, and think about how their identities work together, that work can be done. But I'm not going to run us through that. But I am going to talk a little bit about how it works for me, right? So people can understand, not that I'm an exemplar of any particular identity or anything else like this, but to understand how that shaped and affected my journey through the world, right? Now, I just want to say one or two other things about social identity. It's not always clear by looking at people what their identities are, okay? I have a son, my youngest son, who has a mild form of autism. By looking at him, you would not know it, okay? Some things, like my race, are very obvious, okay? But other things are not. Sometimes we can be members of social identity groups and not know it, not be aware at all that we're a member of that group. Now, sometimes, very interesting, there are people who are raised thinking that they are one racial identity group, and then they do the genetic testing or whatever else, or they look through the family history and find out that their racial history is much more complex. But it's not always along the lines of race or gender or things like that. Before coming to Oswego, I spent about 3.5 years in Kentucky. I was in Kentucky. Has anyone ever been to Kentucky? Lived in Kentucky? Yes, okay. So they're very serious about basketball in Kentucky. Like really serious about basketball in Kentucky. Now, I had never been outside of sort of upstate Western New York, grew up in Rochester, worked in Geneva, did all these other kinds of things in my life. Going to Danville, Kentucky, Central Kentucky, okay? Horse country, okay? Had torn up my knee playing basketball, which I don't play anymore because I'm old. And I was at the physical therapist, and they're working on my knee and everything else. And it was after the big UK, I'm going to say this right now for people who've been to Kentucky, Louisville, UK basketball game. And there had been some back and forth, and I don't even remember to now what happened exactly. Some coach said something to the crowd or something like that. And so you have all the people in their, University of Kentucky blue, folks in their cardinal red for the Louisville, jaw-jacking back and forth in the place, and there's a cacophony and noise and everything else. So I'm sitting there with my knee out, and she's putting these things on my knee to help with the adhesions and this electrical stimulus and all this stuff. And I say, but it's the same state. Like literally the schools are an hour and a half away from each other. Complete silence. And again, there's another time in my life when I'm like, I'm not sure I should have said that. Without hesitating, without looking up, right? She says, it's okay. He's a Yankee. He doesn't understand. And everybody laughs and everything else, and I'm like, I'm a Yankee? And not like a New York Yankee, not like Pride of the Yankees. I'm not Lou Gehrig. I'm a Yankee, right? And I'm like, I've never of the many things I thought I might be ascribed to me or called in my life, Yankee was not on the list. Just didn't. I went home and I told Sarah, I'm like, Sarah, I'm a Yankee. And she's like, what? So I'd never really thought about myself in that way, okay? But guess what? I was in that social identity group. Some of social identity groups are ascribed to us. Some are self-claimed. Sometimes they're simultaneous. As a black man, I identify as a black man, as part of the black race. That is also something that people often ascribe to me because it's one of the first things they notice about me, okay? I want to say, though, there's something about social identities where we can think about them in like granite blocks, like this big block of things. But we're not all just one thing, right? So I, right here, being this person on the stage, what are the many things that I am? I'm a black man. I'm 52, so I call myself middle young, right? I haven't trademarked that yet, so you can still use it, okay? I'm heterosexual. I'm cisgendered, which means my sex at birth and my gender identity and expression are the same, okay? I am the youngest of 3 siblings in my family. My mother still calls me the baby. I have a 5-month-old granddaughter. I've told my mother, it was in this last week, I can't be a baby if I'm a grandpa. Okay? Yeah, you can. Guess what? Lost that argument. But I'm all of these things all at once. And there are times at which different parts of my identity come to the fore at different moments. There are times very, very much in navigating the world or being in different contexts where my race, I really am feeling and experiencing my racial identity. Sometimes it's my age, right? I'm at a point where I get called Mr. a lot, or Sir. I miss the days when I was just, hey, you. But now I'm Mr. or Sir, because I'm at that age. I've got the gray showing where I'm a Mr. or Sir, right? And there's other parts of my identity that come to the fore, my socioeconomic class, things like this. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and talking to some of my friends who work in higher ed, they've been laid off. They've been furloughed. My son's friends have young people in their early 20s or so forth. Some of them work in service industries. They're unemployed. And yet I am not doing like horrible, but I'm doing okay. I'm still gainfully employed. And the impact upon them is different than the impact upon me. I can still pay my mortgage. I can still feed my, I'm not feeding a family, although I may eat like a family, but I feed myself and everything else and supply the needs of my household, where other people are experiencing that very, very differently than me. So what does all this mean? All these things that I am in terms of navigating the world, right? And some experiences. There's this thing, and it's so simple and clear and makes so much sense, but I lose sight of it all the time. I have to remind myself, right? And I do this stuff all the time, 24/7. I'm thinking about this stuff, and I still have to remind myself. The way that I experience things and navigate the world, everyone else is not having that experience. As a matter of fact, I could be in the room and no one else is having that experience. So I'll give you an example. I am a philosopher by trade. It's my PhD and my master's degree is in philosophy, or as my father would say when he was still alive, soon to be unemployed. Okay. My father grew up immigrated to this country from the Bahamas, single parent household, incredible work ethic. And when I told him I was going back to graduate school to study philosophy, he's like, I don't know that I would ever see a day where someone would get paid to think. I think all the time. Where's my check? Right? So, PhD and everything in philosophy, right? And so I was at this sort of big philosophy shindig conference. All these people are there. I met people's books that I had read. Like, it was wonderful, like Disneyland for nerds, okay? Just all kinds of wonderful people, and I'm meeting them, and I'm having this great time, and I'm, it's in Philadelphia, and this Marriott downtown, and the conference center is attached to the hotel, and I'm waiting for the elevator, and I turn, and there's a person next to me, and I'm like, hasn't this just been a great day? And they look at me, and they're like, what in the world are you talking about? This has been a horrible day. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, what happened? Well, this person was differently able. They were in a wheelchair. And the hotel had very limited accessible bathrooms. Wow, I didn't have that experience because I don't go through the world like that. This person was not cisgendered. They were gender nonconforming, meaning that their gender identity did not match their sex at birth, and people were misgendering them, right? And so I had gone through this day where I was getting books signed by people that I worshiped and idolized. I was, taking pictures, and I don't take many selfies, but I took a bunch then, right? With all these wonderful people. And that individual had almost the exact opposite experience. They felt violated, invalidated. They had some really damaging experiences. Same conference. And so it just struck me, if I hadn't talked to that individual and you'd walked up to me and said, hey, how was that big philosophy shindig, right? I would have said, it was the best philosophy shindig ever. It was wonderful, it was fantastic. And that would be true for me, but it's not true for everyone. So, and it's one of those things that we can almost naturally fall into, right? I had a parent in my first year here at SUNY Oswego come up to me during an admissions event and say, is Oswego a safe place for my daughter? And I was about to give the answer, of course it is. Give us your money, send us your kid, join our community, right? Okay. And I thought about it for a second. I'm a big dude, right? And even when I'm walking around with my 18-year-old dog, in the neighborhood, I'm still a big dude, right? My perception of unsafe circumstances may not match that of an 18-year-old young woman. So I said, these are the reasons why I think our community is safe, but I would love to put you in touch with some of our students who could talk to you about their experiences so you could get a more realistic view, right? Because I'm going to tell you from my experience, and I'm not sure my experience is going to match up, So I'll say one or two other things just about my experience. Similar to that person who was differently abled, I had a really unfortunate experience as a professional philosopher. I went to a conference. It was an international conference in Atlanta, Georgia. And I was there to present a paper, and I was really excited. This was, I'd attended conferences before, but this is the first time that I'd really had a piece of work vetted and evaluated, and they were going to let me talk about dead people and, people who wrote 1,000 years ago, the things I think about. And I remember going to the opening dinner for the conference, and I put on, my suit. My suit, go to the conference, and someone walks up to me and they're like, hey, so glad that you're here. I need to talk to you for a second. I'm like, they read my paper. This is why I'd love to talk to you. We need more coffee. There's not enough coffee at the coffee station. So I sat for a second. Okay, I don't work here. Oh, okay. A couple other things happened like this. And so it really affected me. And I don't think that this person had bad intentions. I'm not trying to diagnose what their thoughts were. I'm just talking about the impact it had on me. Because it seemed the way it felt to me. What am I doing here? Like they saw me and they didn't really see me. They saw a person and thought and assumed I was hotel staff. I'll give you one over. We're not going to dwell on this, but I want to get to other stuff, right? My first day, I'm a graduate of Roberts Wesleyan College, Rochester, New York. North Charlotte, exactly. Yep. So my first day on campus, right? I'm excited, and this is how way back it was. No computers. You had to go to the gym and sign up on a piece of paper for your classes and stuff like that, Still have the typewriter that I wrote my first college paper on. So I come and, I'm walking out of the sort of gymnasium is where they kind of had all that stuff, right? The fitness center. And I'm going back to my dormitory. And someone says, hey, are you a new student? I'm like, yes, I am a new student. Liberal arts college experience, small, intimate, everything else. That is so awesome. We have needed a point guard on the basketball team. I don't play basketball. I am not on the basketball team. I do it occasionally for fun, but I don't play basketball. Which was followed up by, hey, do you know anybody? Well, no, I don't, because I'm not a basketball player. That happened 9 more times before I got to my dorm. Somebody stopped me and said, are you a basketball player? So by the time I got to my dorm, one of the other guys in the dorm is a good friend of mine, Alvin James, who's now a history teacher in Chicago. I was ready to pack my stuff up. I was really angry. And he's like, no, you can't listen. People will do things out of malice, they do it out of ignorance, but you can't throw away your education because of this kind of thing. And that started a friendship that has lasted to this day. I actually talked to Alvin on last Monday. All of us old guys get together on Zoom and talk about our new injuries. My shoulder's bothering me. But it's those things that can really help make a person feel like they belong or they don't. And a lot of those things aren't about people being mean or awful or horrible. It's just that there's not, sometimes a lack of an awareness And sometimes people don't even know that they're doing it, right? A younger version of myself, didn't play basketball, ran track, ran cross country in high school. If I was still running, I would challenge Malcolm to a race, see who's still got the speed, right? I was a distance runner, by the way, so I could not sprint at all. So I would run all over Rochester. I would run, so I was just inside the limit for a bus, right? It had to be like roughly a mile, a little over a mile. It was inside of that. So I would run to school, run home from school, run to the park, Cobbs Hill Park, run around the reservoir, run back home. What I noticed as I hit my teenage years, around 10th grade or so, and I started to fill out, right, is that I would be running, like through the streets of Rochester, right? And people would see me running, and sometimes they would do stuff like this. And literally someone ran and almost busted their head open on the stairs of their house because they, I don't know, thought I was chasing them. Like, here comes this guy running. I was the president of the French club. I was on the math team. The most dangerous thing I could do was bust an equation. But that's not what people experienced, right? As I've aged, that's sort of turned into something different. But even I've noticed when I was younger, people who knew me, I'd be walking up to them, and this would happen sometimes with women, and they would grab their purses closer to them, and they wouldn't even know that they're doing it. So what's the rub of all of this? Our identities give us different experiences. Pastor and I, although we look like twins, if I didn't have the beard, right? We have very different experiences. I can learn about life in the world and things like that by talking to him. He can share the richness of his experience with me. And that's what true communities do, right? We learn from each other, right? We help one another. And that's the power of our identities, okay? Sort of like, headlights on a car. Like later tonight, after 8 o'clock, sun goes down, gets dark, my night vision's not as good as it used to be. Gotta turn the headlights on. Should anyways, even if you have good night vision, okay? Your headlights allow you to see things, right? Our identities highlight things. Those experiences allow us to see things out in the world through our experiences, okay? I've been a cisgendered male my entire life. I have no idea what it's like to be a woman. I have no idea what it's like to be a woman in the 21st century. I have no idea what it's like to be a woman in Oswego, New York. If I want to know what that's like, I got to talk to some women. And I can learn from their experiences, right? But just like our identities are highlights, there are things that we can't see. So here's the quiz time. Been talking a lot. Going to quiz you now. What is one of the most important safety features on an automobile? Seatbelts is good. I like the seatbelt. I'm sorry, what's your name? Phil. I like Phil's seatbelt answer. Especially since I have had enough fender benders in my life. I'm a better driver now, right? But without the seatbelt, you end up getting really hurt. But that's not what I'm thinking, but a good one, yes. Brakes are good too, because it's great to go forward or backwards, but it's better to stop, As when my father was teaching me when I was younger, he had a Buick Regal, pride and joy. He went to teach me at Monroe Community College's parking lot. I stepped into the car immediately on the accelerator, thankfully in park. Your mother's going to teach you how to drive. You were about to say yes.
Speaking as a school bus driver.
Uh-oh.
I say mirror.
There you go. What's your name? Sandy is correct. Well, not just correct. All the answers are correct. That's what I was thinking of. Why are mirrors important, Sandy? Exactly, right? So you wouldn't be able to see, because a school bus is a long thing. You're not going to be able to just kind of crick your neck back and see, right? And so Those mirrors allow you to see in those spaces, okay? That's what engaging with other people does for us. Doing this kind of work, thinking about identity, the series that you're in now, the one that you did before, helps you see into those spaces. Kind of like side mirrors for your soul. I'm writing that book, by the way, don't steal the title. But just like those spaces are there, and we can actually explore them and with help of others get into them and resolve those spaces where we can't see into leave us really susceptible to a couple of different things. Stereotypes is one. Stereotypes is just a fixed generalization about people or classes or groups of people, things like that. When I was moving from here to Kentucky, it was interesting. You know, I took this job in Center College in Danville, Kentucky. My family, friends of mine. Are you going to be okay? I don't know. Why wouldn't I be okay? It's Kentucky. Okay. Have you been to Kentucky? Nope. Do you know someone from Kentucky? Nope. Don't know anybody from Kentucky. Fantastic. So what are, well, you know, it's Kentucky. No, I don't know. People had a lot of ideas about what the state of Kentucky was like, what the people were like, and everything else. I went there with an open mind. You know what I found out about Kentucky? There are some challenges that are part of the history of Kentucky. That is true. Are there good people there? Yes. Still have friends who are there. They're fantastic and good people. Are there people who are not so good and not up to good? Yeah. Was it this horrible backwater badland that people were describing? No. People asking me if I play basketball based on a stereotype about black men. One of the hardest things is when those stereotypes work their way deeply into our subconscious. There's part of how we are as human beings and we perceive the world and engage with it that saves our lives, basically, you know? We make a lot of assumptions. And those generalizations can help us navigate the world, okay? Imagine if I was driving down the street and I saw Elim Grace Church, and I think, wow, I wonder what that is. I wonder if they sell windows there. Well, you're laughing, right? You're laughing. You're like, that seems silly. It's a church. Well, you assume what's going on. Well, there's an altar, there's church services, there's, you know, everything. There's a pastor. You make assumptions, right? One of the things that annoys me, and I don't eat fast food anymore, that I tell Sarah about at all, but, you know, it's not like I'm going to be tempted on the way home to stop for a cheeseburger. But people will go into fast food restaurants or sit at the drive-thru like they've just seen the menu for the first time. I wonder, do you have, it's Dunkin' Donuts, they make donuts and coffee, okay? Just get the donuts and coffee. But those assumptions that we make help us navigate the world. I don't have to sit at a traffic light and think, does this one work like the other one? No, I know and I assume and I move forward. When we start applying those assumptions, or even not even thinking about those things, and rely on them in our relationships with other people, that's where it becomes problematic. And those things can work their way over time into our subconscious, right? So one of the things I did in my first year on the job, I kind of do this thing where I, like on a monthly basis, or at least once a year, step back and think about what I'm doing, okay? Just good practice. And so chief diversity officer, working on these committees and the community and everything else, and I step back and I look at what I'm doing. I've engaged with students, I can tell President Stanley, I've engaged with students. I've done all these things. And then I look at the student groups, the Black Student Union, Latino Student Union, the African Student Association, the African American Men's Empowerment Network. Are you getting a theme? I had gone and gravitated to people that I felt subconsciously drawn to, that were close to or part of my racial identity group, without even thinking about it. Here's the groups I didn't reach out to in my first 3 months: the Young Republicans, right? The Storytellers Guild, a bunch of other groups. So I had to be, okay, I need to be intentional about doing this, or I'm going to keep drifting back into this without even thinking about it. To really get you the power of how some of this stuff works and these ways in which we can get conditioned over time, as a part of my education, in graduate school, you have to give papers. You present a paper, not like in a big hall like this, but you stand up and people then respond to them, and it's part of how you learn how to form arguments and how you learn how to defend yourself and everything else like that, and defend your reasoning, and it's part of graduate education. So I was doing that, and I finished my paper, and there was a guy in the PhD program ahead of me called Todd Long. His name's Todd Long. He's a professor now. He has really long COVID-19 hair. It's like down to his shoulders now. It's like, I joke with him. He looks like D'Artagnan from a Three Musketeers movie. So Todd's there, and he's questioning. He's challenging my argument, right? Now, I'm a first-year graduate student. He's actually at the dissertation phase, so there's all this stuff. And I'm standing there behind this like little podium, not a big one like this, and I'm really struggling because I'm getting angry, and really more angry than I should about an argument about how words get used, right? And not like hate speech words, like, just about semantics and meaning is what my paper was about. And I had this feeling like I just wanted to go up and hit him upside his head. And I was really angry and everything else. And I'm surreal kind of thing. I'm trying to address his question while experiencing this. So like afterwards, I was just reflecting on it. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And, it dawned on me, right? So here's some things about philosophy that you may not know, okay? And if you're playing Trivial Pursuit ever, if people still play that, you'll have this answer. Philosophy is not a very diverse academic discipline. In my graduate studies at the U of R, I was the only black person in my PhD program. I met my first other person working in academic philosophy when I got my first job at Hobart and William Smith. I'd gone through an undergraduate education, a graduate education, and never had an educator that was a person of color. So I'm the only black person in this context presenting a paper. And here's some things about Todd. You don't know Todd, but you can look up his faculty page at Cal San Luis Obispo. You'll see his long hair. Todd is from deep Mississippi and has a Mississippi drawl. Okay, and I'm not going to try to repeat it. It would be cartoonish and disrespectful to him. But it's a very deep and pronounced Southern accent. So here's what I figured out was going on for me. I'm a black man in a really non-diverse context, and this Southern white male is challenging me. And I'm responding to that on a subconscious level. And the truth of it is that I'm both simultaneously afraid of him and angry at the same time. And as I really reflected on it, it's like somewhere back in my subconscious is this belief that Southern white men are racists. Now, if you asked me before that incident, Hook me up to a polygraph. Do you think that white people from the South are racist? No, I was raised in a household where everyone was a citizen of heaven. You judge people by their character. Believed it. Not just mouthing the words, believed it in my heart. And yet I find myself in this context where subconsciously there's this other thing going on. So I had a conversation with Todd about it. It's like, look, I was really struggling when you were asking questions. I need to talk to you because I think I was reacting to the fact that you're from the South, and I was worried about his reaction. His reaction was like, wow, thank God someone has actually finally said this to me. Here's the story about Todd. Intelligent guy. People thought he was a complete idiot and treated him as such because he had a Southern accent. They stereotyped him. They stereotyped him as a racist. They stereotyped him in a lot of different ways. And so he was tired of being in context. Just like I was tired of being thought of as a basketball player and in those places not being seen, Todd was tired of not being seen also. So here I am, Johnny Ethics, study ethics and social justice as an undergraduate, get into graduate school, do all this stuff, and yet still that belief was unsettled in there. But here's the best part. Disciplines like psychology show us that we can unsettle that. That the same way that we can subconsciously form these patterns and beliefs and everything else like that, we can change those things. Here's one of the things I realized. I don't hang around with certain kinds of people. And in doing so, that leaves me open to stereotypes, right? Without even knowing it. So part of my mission in life is to be around a lot of different kinds of people, because the research shows that disrupts that kind of thinking. There are people in Rochester. You live in Oswego. Why do you live in Oswego? Why don't you live in Syracuse or Rochester? Because I like Oswego. Well, it's Oswego. Well, you have never been there because I know you, right? There are people who have stereotypes about this community. Our students have stereotypes about or implicit beliefs about community members and vice versa. Those are the things that really can get in the way of our relationships, things like that. One of the telling signs, and this is a test for you, little home test. How many people have a cell phone? Okay. How many people have at least one emergency contact on their cell phone? I got several, okay. Case of emergency, dial those folks, okay. Think about your emergency contact or contacts. Think about those closest people to you, the people that you share your pain, your sorrow, your hopes, and everything else, the most trusted people that are closest to you. Get their names and faces in your head for a second. Then look at the things that they hold in common. When I think about the people who are my emergency contacts and the people that I really trust and the folks that I stay in touch with and the people that are really close to the center of my heart, there's a lot of other ways of being in the world. There's a lot of identities that are not represented by those folks. And if that's my circle of trust there, those are my closest people, wow, what does that say for me in terms of the challenge I have in terms of reaching out? The people I choose to approach as friends, the people that I think are safe and comfortable with, it's not just a matter of pure choice. Some of that stuff is subconsciously habituated in us. But the beautiful thing is that we have the power to change that stuff. So what I'm going to do is stop now, right? And I could talk forever. Just ask, my niece or, my brother. But what I want you to think about is this. A couple of things to take away. Our social identities are beautiful and wonderful things that give us insight into the world, but we also have to understand and own the things that we don't know and how they set us up and make us vulnerable, right? Our mission in life ought to be, I hazard to say, to respect the journeys and lives of other people. And while we're here on this mortal coil, take as much time as we can to meet as many different types of people. I spent 3 years in Kentucky, and I am so thankful for that. I learned a lot of stuff about a lot of things that I didn't know about it before. I learned about pressures on family farmers and the I don't want to be political or whatever else, but corporate farming's impinging on family farmers, especially in the South. Had no idea the extent of that until I lived in Kentucky. I did not understand rural poverty to the degree and the way that it really affects people's lives until I was in Kentucky. And if I hadn't had some of those direct experiences, if I hadn't, even if I was in Kentucky, didn't reach out to people that were different than the normal folks I'd want to be around, I wouldn't have that understanding. I wouldn't be able to connect with those people. I would still have those biases back there. So I'll stop. People want to have questions, comments, things that people want to think about while we got some time. Yes.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much
Yeah.
for coming this evening. So you made, we were talking a moment ago, or you were talking about the contacts in our cell phones.
Yeah.
And you said, think about those people, and then you made a comment, what does that say about ourselves? So I lost
Yeah.
that.
So I talk a lot about myself, not because I think I'm awesome, because my 18-year-old son tells me constantly that I'm not. It's kind of a humility check. But I talk about myself because then it's a safe way for people to explore. So let's talk about my contacts. If you looked at all of them, the people in my emergency contacts, they are all middle class to upper middle class. And what that says about me is that I've situated or gravitated myself closely around people from those classes. And what that means for me is I probably need to think about engaging with people who are not in the same socioeconomic class as I am. Yeah.
The follow-up question is,
Just say it, it's okay.
the follow-up question is, were you judging
No.
that? Okay.
No, this is not a judgment. I want to make this clear. This is not about me being a good or bad person. It's about identifying areas where I need to develop. Yeah.
But it sounded like you were promoting a particular idea based on that assessment. So based on your contact list, you're promoting. So I'm trying to understand why you think it's a good idea. I guess the reservation is, I felt labeled.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that's
And
legitimate.
I felt like based on that idea that I need to go through my contact list and I need to do something because all of my contacts are such and such. And that's probably not what you meant, but it made me feel, and I guess the second piece that I would just say is that I think, and I'll just try to summarize this. So I think one of the challenges in American education is that it is very horizontal, and that when we live in a horizontal context where we're trying to understand and value and respect one another horizontally, which is a very good thing, I think there's an emptiness. It's my conviction that there's an emptiness in that propensity to remain horizontal, which has its benefits and absolutely is important. But the absence of a vertical in American education, which is so horizontal, in my opinion, is a concern.
Yeah, I hear you. So let me address two of these things. So having any implicit association, positive or negative, does not make you a bad person, doesn't make you a good person. It makes you a human. So let me rephrase this question in a way that may remove, hopefully, any potential judgment, okay? Would you like to have only 10% of what God has for you? Well, if it's wrath and judgment, you're like, I'll take 10% of the wrath and judgment. Can I get 80 or 90% of the grace, could we please? So think about it this way. You know, it doesn't have to be a deficit kind of thing. So when I look at these kinds of things, and I think about myself and my contact list, and the limited class of socioeconomic statuses that are there, racial identities of there, first languages that are there, and everything else like this, I don't think, God, I'm such a horrible, evil person with these horrible biases. I'm like, wow, there is something that has interfered with me enjoying and participating in and sharing and learning from and sharing back with all of these people. Right? Why would I, my father, God love him, while he was with us, watched maybe 3 television channels, right? And that's great for him. He wanted to watch 3 television channels. There was more on TV, more things he could learn. You could watch the Home Improvement Network, learn how to design on a dime or do something else like this. What we have before us is an array of amazing individuals and amazing lives, and yet we, sometimes by choice and sometimes subconsciously, limit ourselves to a small slither of that. And we don't have to. Well, then it comes down to why? Because it's comfortable? Because we feel close to those people? But why? Mm-hmm.
The proposition is, there's so much more out there, but it feels like a little odd that the context is almost like a persuasion, but I guess that's not a bad thing.
Again, one of the purposes here was, if you're going to come, you're going to come open and willing to be persuaded, or, be willing, to persuade other people. So he's going to say things that you're going to disagree with, and that's okay. The point is to get you, to think. But I think that part of what, at least pastorally, part of the challenge has always been, that we are called to reach a community. Each of us are called to, reach a particular group of people. Now, that particular group of people may be people just like you, but it may also be people unlike you. And if God calls you to somebody unlike you, the chances are he's going to challenge some things within you that you're going to have to overcome, which are some of the things that he's discussing, in order to reach the Gentile if you're a Jew. Just like the apostles had to overcome a bunch of things in their own minds and hearts to be convinced by the grace of God that the grace was also reserved for them. So I think that's part of what, at least pastorally, and we've talked about that already in terms of our "I Am My Brother's Keeper" and, the Jews and the gospel going out to the Gentiles. So I think that's the heart of what, about what he's suggesting.
So I could easily, coming to Oswego, could have stayed in my comfort zone, right? Even within my work. And I felt at the end of my first year that I wasn't meeting enough people in Oswego, right? And someone came up to me and said, do you want to join Oswego Rotary? And I was like, I don't like cold chicken, right? Because that's what I thought of Rotary, right, at the time. But I went to a meeting, and it was nice, and I went to the meeting and so forth. And I was glad that I went there, because what happened was I met people that I would have never met if I had just stayed within my sphere, right? And then part of doing that means I could talk to them about the work that I do. I learned a lot of things about this city that I did not know before, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I could have been Jonah. I don't want to hang out with those Ninevites. I mean, but you, yeah, someone in the back, yeah.
Are there some practical tools that you might give us to help diffuse the tensions that I might be feeling in exploring a relationship with someone that I might not know? Sometimes you get a little bit defensive right out of the gate, and you don't mean to be, but you're assessing where are they coming from.
Absolutely.
And you feel like maybe targeted or...
Yeah.
So what kind of things can you give us to help us
Sure.
diffuse that within us?
Yeah. So again, listen to me enough, you hear stories about my kids or my family, or my life, or bad movies that I've seen. But this is not going to be a bad movie. My first college roommate came up to me, first day that I was at Roberts Wesleyan, and said, "Hey, I got some questions. I got a question I want to ask you." I'm like, "Sure, okay." It's like, "Are black people like they are on TV?" And I thought about it for a second, and I'm like, is anybody like they are on TV? No, I think about that a lot for this reason. I think it was an incredibly courageous act on his part to ask me that question, having known me for only part of a day, right? Because he didn't know how I was going to interact or react to that question, right? But let's think about what he said. He didn't make an accusation. Hey, black people are like they are on TV, right? And then expect me to refute it or something like that, right? So in approaching people, part of it is stating your intentions clearly and coming in a spirit of humility, right? And then in terms of, for a while there before I bought a house, and I'm down County Route 89 now. I was right over here on West 5th Street for a while, renting a house, okay? And I was taking my garbage cans out, and the lady next door was taking her garbage cans out. And I said, "Hey, I've been living next door for you a little bit. Can you tell me about this neighborhood? Have you lived here a long time? I just really am kind of curious. I want to know, where I'm living," right? And it was just an open inquiry, okay? And I genuinely meant that. I'm like, "Tell me what's going on with these people." I didn't say things like that, right? And she told me about the old Polish neighborhood and who had this and for a 50-year history of the neighborhood. Learned a lot, right? One of the things to do if you're feeling defensive or tense is to actually name that, okay? If someone's engaging with you, you can actually say, I just need a break for a second because or ask them, is this a question or is this an accusation or you can set the terms of discourse, right? So I was talking to someone the other day, and this was even on Zoom, and I was like, I just want to make sure we're going to have a dialogue and not a debate or an argument, right? Because I'm happy to dialogue with you because then, it's not about winning, it's about understanding. But if you want a debate or an argument, then I'm not really interested in that, okay? And it's fair to say that to someone, right? To do those kinds of things. The other thing to think about is what might be going on for you in that moment, right? So when Todd was talking to me, I was triggered by stuff that had nothing to do with what Todd said. It was just Todd's presence and some stuff that was going on in my subconscious, right? And you can always, if you're in an engagement, say, I really want to talk to you, but can we talk again another time, okay? And then reflect on what's going on for you around this, right? There are a lot of things that are tough issues to talk about in the world, but I think one of the things that helps is being explicit in an openness and earnestness to want to understand. As a person who's heterosexual, working with people who are part of the LGBTQ plus community, it's not my community. And I have to say, look, I'm here, even as a professional or just as a human being, I want to help and work with you, but you have to understand I'm learning this and I need your understanding while I do this, right? And part of, what's hard sometimes challenging about working with young people is that sometimes their patience with people's development it can not be as long as other folks, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing or whatever else, but not a judgment on them. But if you open those contexts in that kind of way, you've got a chance to really create opportunities for connection. So I hope that answers your question. So we had a couple folks, yeah.
Hi. My husband and I have had the privilege of being involved with the college kids and driving them to church over the years. And I would say probably 90% of them are either foreign students or black females from the city, which I'm always thinking, man, the city. I'm always thinking, man, those black families down there know how to raise good Christian girls, because they come up here and they're strong in their faith. And we have them over for dinner, and they love coming into an upstate New York home, because I imagine they've been raised in apartments or, you know.
Could be brownstones. I honestly don't know.
Yeah, who knows? But they love coming. They love. It's been wonderful. So now we're trying to reconnect with them, and we've had this big Black Lives Matter movement come through our country.
Yeah.
How do we? I want to know how they're feeling, and what this has meant to them.
Sure.
Is it going to be awkward? Is it going to be, what? Help me in knowing just how to love them and understand them.
Great question, right? So some of this can be made easier if you have a pre-existing relationship with someone. If you're taking these young ladies to church and everything else like this. So a good friend of mine, Clay, guy I've known for, I don't know how long, 20 years plus. We're on a Zoom call together, all of us old college roommates, everything else like this, right? He lives in Javan, New York. He's, just good guy, right? We're on the call, and he's like, hey, Rodman, I want to ask you this question, and I'm not sure how to word it, but here's what I'm thinking, why is it Black Lives Matter, not all lives matter, right? And I said, Clay, that's a great question. He's like, I'm not trying to offend. I'm like, no, I take you as being genuine, and it helps that we have a 30-year friendship, right? That we can talk about this. And we had a beautiful conversation about that. So if you know these young ladies, right, and you're taking them to church and everything else like this, coming from a place of love and saying, I see all this stuff going on in the world, and I love you, I care for you, or whatever else, and I just want to, if you're willing to share, right, not making a mandate, but I just want to know how this has affected you, and maybe what I can do as you think about or live through this stuff. That opens a door, right? It's different if you say to them, hey, while you're here, defend these people that are saying this or doing this or other kinds of things. That's a very different sort of signal and everything else than saying to someone, hey, these things are going on, help me understand, right? We have a number of students who have family in Puerto Rico. We have staff members and professors from the college that have family or actually are immigrants from Puerto Rico. And when the hurricane hit and stuff was going on, I went up to them and said, hey, I'm here for you. You're my friend. You're my colleague. Is there a way I can help you? I don't know what you're going through with this, but I'm here for you. So presenting yourself as available there in a spirit of love, that opens doors, right? And can make what could be an uneasy conversation more open, right? So that would be my suggestion to you. We had a few more hands. Yeah.
We have about 6 more minutes, and then we'll officially end the meeting for those of you that are on the schedule, and then if you want to hang out more and talk, that'll be up to Dr.
I got to do what the pastor says.
Hi. You must have heard of Reverend Jeremiah, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know him. So I knew him even before I knew he was a reverend, when he was just the librarian in Phyllis Wheatley Library.
Really?
Yes. I've known him for years and years and years, and he's known my family, and I actually kind of grew up with his kids in Progressive. Yeah.
When you started talking, I thought, oh, he can relate to Jeremiah. I've operated under the little media clip when Obama was president, when he said they highlighted that, but God damn America. And I thought, well, I mean, I didn't agree with Obama anyway, but I thought, whoa, I don't want a thing to do with him now. If he was in that church, well, God led me just recently to look up Jeremiah Wright. That man is a brother in Christ, and I had no idea. I was played by the media, and also I wanted to stay in my little thing of where I'm at. And I didn't, but I looked him up. I can't get enough of him now. I love that man. I'm understanding racism and the systemic thing that always kind of bothered me, the name of it, but I'm understanding it because I'm learning from him. He goes, you know, I'm not for reparations. I mean, there's things I can't go for right now. But hey, I'm having a great time just because God let me get out of this, move out and look. And I just wanted to say that. Don't be afraid of anything, people.
So I got to apologize to you because I had the wrong Jeremiah Wright. I was thinking of a guy in Rochester who was my pastor growing up, but I don't personally know the Reverend you're talking about.
I knew you
but
wouldn't.
I do know
probably.
about him. You know, so it is. We get defensive when people respond to injustice with anger, right? I get defensive when people respond to injustice with anger. Okay. But anger is Marshall Crenshaw, oh, not Marshall, Marshall, oh gosh, I'm going to forget his name. It's because I'm tired. Rosenberg, thank you. The old brain's like a 57 Chevy, just turn the key constantly and eventually it kicks in. Marshall Rosenberg is a great guy. He was a diplomat. He's got this work on nonviolent communication. Anger is a predictable response to people not getting their needs met, right, in a variety of ways. And sometimes we get so caught up in the affective component that we lose what really is going on for them, okay? And it's easy to stay looking at the anger. Why are they angry? Why are not? Instead of looking, at what's really going on. When Syracuse University students protested last year, people were like, they wrote demands and they're angry and they're stupid and everything else, and why did they write all this? And I'm like, when I look at this, I'm not attending to that directly. I hear in their anger. I'm looking at what the needs are, right? Why do they want to change the curriculum? It's like, what's going on? What do they need from there? What is this and what's going on? And those kinds of things. But I'm sorry, I'm making us really late, but yeah, please.
George, you got the last question, and then we'll pray, and
thank
then
you.
we can hang out a little bit longer.
I'm happy to hang out. So
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
I wanted to thank you first. When you said that it's not about winning the argument, I've had the privilege of growing up here in Oswego, back when there was the Italian Catholic Church and the Polish Catholic Church and so on. And as time has gone by, like you said, you change, you develop other social identities. I identify a bit more, I'm Protestant, I'm an evangelical. I don't worry so much about my Italian heritage. And there comes a time that you blend together. There's a lot of fear in the country about blending, that people want to save what they've got. Is that inevitable? Or how can we keep that from being inevitable? And sorry that I'm the last one.
Wow. Now you get to drop the mic too. So, wow, there's so many dimensions to that. So let me say a few different things. It is important to maintain and keep value, right? It is important to remember history, okay? Those things are important. And I don't know, I might use a slightly different word than blend, okay? And this is not a criticism, that's not me being whatever else, but when we bring other people into our community, right? And our community dynamic changes, okay? We end up losing some stuff, right? And that can be part of the process of change sometimes, right? My old neighborhood, right? I remember growing up, there were all these kids there and everything else, and it was a neighborhood. Then for a while when my parents were there, it felt like a residential district because they didn't know their neighbors, right? And now it's a neighborhood again, right? So how do we keep a hold of some of those memories and some of that stuff while embracing and bringing in new energy and stuff like this? The unknown is always dangerous, always causes us uncertainty, right? I am the kind of person that I can embrace the unknown. Sarah, who I've had in my life and I love for the past 10 years, is I once said to her, which almost led to me sleeping in the garage, were you raised by actuaries or accountants? She plans everything out just to the minute thing, and it's all scheduled, and her calendar is color-coded and everything else like this. Wonderful, right? Together, like I'm the peanut butter, she's the jelly, we're the sandwich together, right? Change for her is hard. The unknown is hard. If change was easy, everybody would do it all the time, right? It's hard for me. One of the things that we can do is acknowledge that, right? That we're worried about that loss, right? But we shouldn't be so worried about the loss that we lose out on what we can gain, okay? Moving from Kentucky to here was a change. I was giving up friends. I was giving up a lot of stuff to come to this new place. But guess what? I got a lot back. New friends that add richness to my life. Another community that I'm a part of. And I didn't lose those friends. It's just that the relationships mediated by distance. And unlike back in the day where you had to send a letter, I can get them on a screen in like 2 seconds, you know. Call them on the cell phone, do all this other kind of stuff. Look on Facebook and see pictures of their cats and puppies and children. So we can create value together as a community. And guess what's true of the past? It happened then too, right? There was a time where the Italian and Polish neighborhoods in Oswego built up and created value. Part of history's unfolding is that those things change over time, right? And we can embrace those changes, preserve the value, right? I am so thankful that my old neighbor Diane told me about the Polish neighborhood. Now I know about that, and I know about the history there. And I share the things that I've learned about that history with other people. And it's increased my valuing of Oswego to know that history. It doesn't have to die and go away. It can change, but we can preserve parts of it. And that can be part of what we contribute to the growth and progress of our community. But it's hard. It is. People fear giving stuff up, fear the unknown, and also fear people that are different than them sometimes too. But a lot of those things are, I want to say this carefully, caused by our ignorance, meaning that we don't know what the future is like, or caused by our ignorance where we don't know what other people are like, right? So what I would say is the solution to that, to get past the fear, as we find like new people, new students, new community members coming, embrace them, right? My sister says, my problem is that I make eye contact with people. And then they start talking to me at bus stations and planes and waiting in line. I'll talk to folks. I love talking to other people. So engage. Open yourself up just a crack. Share what you know. If you know, so you know probably more, not probably, you definitely know more about the old Polish neighborhood, the Italian neighborhood and stuff like that. I would love to sit down and have a conversation and talk with you about that. I don't know enough, right? And together I can share my experiences and we build this together. People think about community as like a Lego set with discrete parts, and if you miss a part, then you can't build the race car. Community is like a mosaic, and you put the pieces together and we make that picture out of those pieces. And each discrete, individual, beautiful one makes that mosaic, and we can build it together. So I'm way over time. Pastor's like, oh my God, somebody flick the lights. This guy's never going to talk. Look, if people still have questions, I know we didn't get to all of them. I'm not going anywhere. You can come up. We can socially distant talk and everything else. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you so much for opening your house of worship to me. And thank you for the discussion tonight.
Thank you. Well, let's pray. Father, we do thank you for this opportunity. We thank you for Dr. Rodman. We thank you for his life and his humility and his courage to be here with us. We ask you to bless him with the wisdom and the strength and the joy that he needs to do the job that you have called him to do. We thank you for getting to know him, and Lord, that perhaps it is the start of a friendship, so we ask you to bless him and his family. Lord Jesus, we're grateful that you came to us and you came for us, that you became a servant and emptied yourself to reach us. Lord, as your disciples in your church, we ask that your heart would be formed within us, that we also, Lord, might go and get to know and to serve and to love those you have sent us to. In your name we pray. Amen. Thank you for coming.